carried away this year with the book of Jonah. So bear with me, be patient with me. I just got very excited. I'm going to have to do a class on Jonah, I already realize. But I just had to share some thoughts with you about the book. Because here on Yom Kippur afternoon, when our stomachs are growling, our heads are a little achy, and we've already probably a little prayed out, we read a book from the Bible. And given the gravity of the day, it's a very unlikely book. A strange, maybe even disturbing book. It says, it begins, the word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai. By the way, in every other prophetic book, there's always a timestamp. The word of the God came to so-and-so in this year under this king. But with Jonah, no. It's like it could happen anytime. And then Jonah is told to go to the great city of Nineveh and proclaim God's judgment for their wicked ways. However, where does Jonah go? Jonah goes in the opposite direction, towards Tarshish. He finds a ship in Jaffa, pays for a ticket, got on the ship, running away from God's service. Of course, we know how it ends. He ends up going to Nineveh. The people atone, God forgives them, and Jonah is unhappy. Here's an interpretation. Once upon a time, there was a man named Jonah whose world was well constructed, well defended, guarded by a very clear set of binaries. Us and them. Our people, those who belong, those who shouldn't really be here. Those who know God, those who know nothing of God. Jonah lived in this neatly constructed world, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, comes God and says, go to Nineveh, preach, make them repent. By the way, who is Nineveh? Nineveh is the capital of the Assyrian Empire, the first great Mesopotamian superpower that in the year 722 BCE came across the Fertile Crescent, destroyed the northern kingdom of Israel, and exiled the 10 tribes that lived there, came down to Jerusalem, seized the city, smashed its walls, took all of its treasures from the Holy Temple, humiliated the king, but didn't destroy the city. And now, go get Nineveh to repent. Why on earth would Jonah want to go to Nineveh and get them to repent? If God wanted to destroy Nineveh, Jonah would have been happy to go there and cheer it on. But why get them to repent? But God says, no. I want you to go and confront your enemy. I want you to go and see how your enemy is human like you are. You see, God says, in me, there are no binaries. In God, there is no us versus them, here versus there. In God, there's oneness. And you must learn to see the other as a part of you, and that his fate is also your fate. Ezehu Gibor, says the Talmud, who is a champion, ha'oseh misono lechavero, the one who makes his enemy his friend. Now go teach them righteousness. But Jonah wants none of that. Because if you take away his binaries, that without his well-constructed world, he's lost. If they're not the them and we're not the us, well then who am I? I don't want to live in a world that isn't set out in clear black and whites. Besides, I have no responsibility for those people. They're not my people. They're not my problem. So where does Jonah go? He goes down. He goes down to Jaffa. And in Jaffa, he goes down to the dock. He pays his fare and gets on the ship. And in the ship, where does he go? He goes down into the hold. And when he's in the hold, he goes to sleep. He'll get as far away from this God as he can get. But then, God sent a mighty wind. The ship was in danger of breaking apart. The sailors, the non-Jewish sailors, by the way, each cried out to his God. They flung the cargo overboard. See, sailors make a living transporting cargo, and now they're literally throwing their livelihood overboard. And so the captain goes to Jonah and finds him asleep and asks him, "How can you be sleeping so soundly?" It's a big question. The world is falling apart and you're sleeping? And when they find out who Jonah is and that he's the reason for the storm, they still don't throw him overboard. Because sailors, again, the non-Jewish sailors follow an ethic to protect the passenger, no matter the cost. Now you might think that Jonah would jump overboard to save them. But Jonah doesn't do anything for anyone. And they're left with no choice. And they make a prayer. "Please don't blame us for this. We have to throw him over." And so they toss him into the sea. God says, "Okay, you want to get away from me? You want to go down? I'll take you down." And he gets swallowed by a fish. Not a whale, that's Pinocchio. This is a fish. And he's taken to the bottom of the sea in the belly of a fish for 3 days. Now, what do you suppose it's like in the belly of a fish? It's probably cold and slimy and smelly and dark and pretty much awful. Kind of like death. You didn't want to be responsible for anyone, Jonah? Your humanity is only for you and you alone? That's death. Welcome to God's classroom. You want to live a selfish, self-absorbed, self-possessed, self-righteous, us versus them lonely life? Well, here's what that looks like. Now you're by yourself. Now you get to be with yourself, self. Day 1 in the belly of the fish. Self-pity. Why do these things always happen to me? Poor me. I can't believe this kind of stuff happens to me. They neglected me. They didn't listen to me. They disrespected me, overlooked me. Self-pity, victimhood. You ever have coffee with someone like that? It's not fun. And they rehearse it and repeat it over and over because it's kind of like a drug. Day 2 in the belly of the fish. Anger. Can you believe that this happened to me? Rage. And this too is rehearsed and repeated because anger makes us feel like we're in control of something we're not. Anger comforts us. It's sure better than shame. Finally, on day 3, when the rage burns out and the self-pity gets stale, he realizes he better do something about this, that he needs to take responsibility and change. So God says, "Okay, see what happens." And the fish spits him out. And the story starts all over again in chapter 4. You will see it. With practically the exact same words. The word of the Lord came to Jonah for a second time. Go to Nineveh. And the story ends with a question. Not does Nineveh change, but does Jonah really change? And it directs the question back to us. Are you really going to change this time? This year, and take responsibility? We're now in the afternoon, nearing the end of Yom Kippur. Are we going to change? Change our behavior, change our attitude, change our minds, address our limitations and flaws? Where are we in our tshuva this afternoon? And with what's left of the day, where do we want to be at the final shofar? The Haftarah can be found on page 367. Sandy will chant it for us.